Sarah thought her mother's diary was just a collection of bedtime memories. But one line, hidden on the last page, revealed a secret that tore her entire family apart. The truth? Her father wasn't the man she thought he was, and someone had gone to great lengths to keep it buried. What happened next forced Dr. Phill to confront one of the most unsettling betrayals ever told on his show. You could feel the silence in that studio. Not the kind that's empty, but the kind that hums before truth explodes. The audience barely breathed. Sarah sat across from Dr. Phill, fingers locked so tight her knuckles went white. On the outside, she looked composed, but her eyes told another story, one built on years of confusion, guilt, and quiet rage. She swallowed hard before she spoke. My whole life was a lie. That line hit like a thunderclap. Even Dr. Phill leaned in. His tone was gentle, but you could tell he already sensed it. This wasn't just about a diary. It was about the kind of secret that poisons a family from the inside out. Dr. Phill asked softly, "Sarah, when did you realize something wasn't right?" She paused. The lights glimmered against the tears she refused to let fall. "The day my mother died," she whispered. That's when the lies started to unravel. The camera zoomed in as she reached for a small notebook on the table. Its cover was faded pink leather, corners frayed, pages swollen from time. A simple diary, but what it carried inside was anything but simple. "She never meant for me to find it," Sarah said. "But somehow it found me." Dr. Phill nodded. "Tell me what you read." Her voice cracked. "It wasn't just my father who lied. It was everyone." A murmur ran through the audience. You could almost feel people holding back gasps. Sarah looked down, flipping the diary open, her fingers trembling as if afraid of touching the words again. She wrote about love, she said quietly, and betrayal. And one name that kept showing up, Michael. Dr. Phill froze for a moment. That name, it sounded familiar. Somewhere deep in his archives, a memory stirred. A man who once sat in that very seat, years ago, accused of abandoning a child. Could be the same one. "Sarah," he said carefully, "do you know who Michael is?" She hesitated. "No, but I think my brother does." For a long moment, no one spoke. The studio lights hummed, cameras locked on Sarah's face. She took a shaky breath. "I don't want to destroy anyone. I just want the truth. Because if I don't find it now, I never will." Dr. Phill leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy, it explains. But you have to be ready for what comes next." Sarah nodded, but you could tell she wasn't ready. Who could be? The diary sat between them like a live wire, silent but full of power. And as the scene faded to black, one question hung in the air, echoing long after the credits would roll. What would you do if a single page in a diary changed everything you believed about your family? Because for Sarah, that question wasn't hypothetical. It was her life now, and the story was only beginning. 3 weeks before Sarah sat under those studio lights, she was alone in her childhood home, the kind of quiet that only old houses know. The air was heavy with dust and memories. Her mother had passed just months earlier, and Sarah had come back to clean out the attic. Each box felt like opening a time capsule of someone she used to be. Photos of birthday cakes, vacation postcards, a broken snow globe, all harmless, until she saw a wooden trunk tucked behind a beam, wrapped in a blanket, sealed with a rusted lock. Inside, her mother's diary. At first, it was comforting. Her mother's neat handwriting, pressed flowers between pages, notes about recipes, and family milestones. It smelled faintly of lilac perfume, the kind Sarah remembered from childhood hugs. For a moment, she smiled. Then, she turned to the final page. The handwriting had changed. Slanted, uneven, almost frantic. "If anyone finds this, forgive me. I couldn't carry the truth any longer. Michael deserves to know what I did." Sarah froze. Michael? Who was Michael? Her mind raced. Her father's name was David. Her brother's name was Ethan. There was no Michael. She flipped back through earlier entries. The name appeared again. Doesn't know she's his. David can never find out. Her stomach twisted. Her hands trembled so hard she almost dropped the diary. That night, she barely slept. Every creak in the house felt like her mother's ghost whispering secrets she wasn't ready to hear. By morning, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She drove to her brother's house. Ethan opened the door with a tired smile that faded when he saw the diary in her hands. "Where did you get that?" he asked, voice flat. "It was in Mom's attic," she said, "under the floorboards." His eyes widened. For a split second, guilt flickered across his face, the kind that only someone who already knows the truth can show. "You were never supposed to find that," he whispered. Sarah stepped closer. "Who's Michael?" He looked away, shaking his head. "You don't want to know, but I need to know." He hesitated, then whispered, "You're not ready." She could barely breathe. "Then tell me why Mom wrote a letter to Dr. Phill." Ethan's head snapped up. "What did you say?" There was an envelope taped to the back of the diary. Sealed. Addressed to him. The color drained from his face. He didn't speak another word. Later that night, Sarah sat on her bed, holding that envelope. Her name wasn't on it, but it felt meant for her. The paper was yellowed, the seal unbroken. She thought about her mother's final words in the hospital. "One day, you'll understand." Now, she finally understood what her mother meant. Understanding was the one thing she'd never be ready for. As Sarah turned the envelope over, she whispered, "Whatever this is, I'm not stopping until I know the truth." And with that, the first crack appeared in the perfect family portrait she'd believed in her entire life. Because sometimes the truth doesn't knock. It hides in the attic, waiting to be found. The envelope sat in Sarah's lap like it was alive, pulsing with a secret that had waited decades to be heard. The seal was still intact, edges brittle with time. For a long moment, she just stared at it, afraid that opening it would make the truth real. Finally, she tore it open. Inside, a single handwritten letter. The paper shook as she unfolded it. Her mother's voice came alive through the words. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. There's no easy way to say this, Sarah. David is not your biological father." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The room spun. Her mind scrambled for sense, for denial, for anything that could undo what she'd just read. The letter continued. "The man who fathered you, his name is Michael. We loved each other once, but our choices hurt people. I made a promise to protect you, even if it meant lying." Sarah pressed her hand over her mouth, tears spilling through her fingers. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, this can't be real." But the letter didn't stop. Her mother had written that she'd reached out to Dr. Phill years ago, during a previous season, when Michael appeared on the show, accused of abandoning his family. She never revealed Sarah's identity, but wrote to him seeking guidance she never followed through on. At the bottom of the letter was one final line. If she ever needs to know, Dr. Phill will know how to help her. That's how Sarah ended up sitting across from Dr. Phill weeks later, holding the same letter in trembling hands. Dr. Phill read it silently, his expression changing from curiosity to disbelief. "I remember this," he finally said. "This handwriting, this story, I've seen it before." He motioned for his producer. They brought out an old file labeled episode 314, The Man Who Walked Away. Inside were photos, transcripts, and one name in bold letters. Michael H. Dr. Phil's voice grew quiet. "Sarah, this man, he came on this show 14 years ago. He claimed he had a daughter he'd never met." Sarah blinked. 14 years ago? That's around the time Mom started getting sick. Dr. Phill nodded slowly. "It fits." They decided to verify the truth once and for all. DNA testing. Sarah agreed immediately. The test took days to process, but emotionally, it felt like centuries. In the meantime, Sarah's world unraveled. Every photo of her childhood felt staged, every memory rehearsed. She started replaying her mother's words in her head, tiny things that never made sense before. "You have his eyes. Some truths can't be fixed, only lived with." And then the call came. The producer's voice was steady, professional, but trembling beneath it. "The results are in." In the studio, cameras rolled as Dr. Phill opened the sealed envelope. He looked at Sarah, then at the audience. You could hear a pin drop. He took a breath. "Sarah," he said softly, "you are not biologically related to the man who raised you." Silence. For a second, she didn't react. her body frozen, her mind blank. Then her shoulders collapsed under the weight of it. "He's not my father," she whispered. Dr. Phill leaned forward, voice low. "Not by blood. But that doesn't erase the love he gave you." Tears streamed down her face. "Then who am I?" That's the question that breaks every person who's ever lived through a secret like this. It's not about paternity. It's about identity, the invisible foundation we build our lives on, suddenly cracked open. As the cameras slowly zoomed out, Dr. Phill placed a hand over the letter. "Sarah," he said quietly, "we've found him. Michael. He's alive, and he's agreed to come on the show." Sarah's breath hitched. "He what?" Dr. Phill nodded solemnly. "He wants to meet you." The lights dimmed, the crowd gasped, and Sarah's world shifted again. Not backward, not forward, just deeper. Because finding the truth wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a confrontation she'd spent her whole life unknowingly preparing for. The studio felt colder that day. The lights were dimmer, the audience quieter, as if everyone knew they were about to witness something that would change lives. Sarah sat in the same chair as before, her pulse racing. Across from her was an empty seat, the one reserved for the man her mother had written about. The man who'd been a ghost in her story for 33 years. Dr. Phil's voice broke the silence. "Sarah, I want you to remember, whatever happens today, you control your reaction. You deserve answers, but you also deserve peace." She nodded, her hands shaking in her lap. The air was electric. Then the studio door opened. A tall man walked in, mid-50s, weathered face, eyes tired but alive. He hesitated before stepping onto the stage. His gaze found Sarah's instantly, and time stopped. You could hear every breath, every heartbeat in the room. He whispered, "Sarah." She froze. That voice, she'd never heard it before, but it carried a strange familiarity, like an echo from another lifetime. Dr. Phill gestured for him to sit. "Michael, you've waited a long time for this moment." Michael's voice trembled. "Too long. I didn't think I'd ever get the chance." Sarah's words came out sharp. "You had 33 years to reach out. Why now?" He looked down. "Because your mother made me promise not to." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Phill leaned forward. "What promise, Michael?" Michael's eyes filled with regret. "She told me if I loved Sarah, I'd stay away. She said she'd protect her, that David would give her the life I couldn't." Sarah's jaw tightened. "You just agree?" Michael nodded slowly. "I was angry at first, but then I saw pictures, birthdays, school plays. You looked happy. I thought maybe she was right." A flash of pain crossed Sarah's face. "You don't get to call that love. You abandoned me." Tears formed in his eyes. "I didn't abandon you, Sarah. I obeyed her." The audience shifted, caught between empathy and disbelief. The truth was no longer black or white. It was a storm of gray. Dr. Phill broke the silence. "Michael, your decision may have come from love, but it left a wound. Do you realize what that cost your daughter?" Michael's voice cracked. "Every day since she was born." Sarah's composure broke. Tears streamed down as years of confusion and anger poured out. "Do you know what it's like to look in a mirror and not see yourself in anyone? To wonder why you never fit?" Michael nodded, crying now. "Ido, because I've lived the same mirror every day." The room was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't need words, only understanding. Dr. Phill leaned back. "This isn't about blame anymore. It's about repair." For the first time, Sarah looked at him, not as a stranger, but as a missing piece of her story. Her anger softened just slightly. But before anyone could exhale, Dr. Phill held up another envelope. "There's one more thing." Sarah frowned. "What is that?" He glanced at her gently. "It's another DNA report. You might want to prepare yourself." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Phill hesitated. "It's about your brother, Ethan." Sarah's voice shook. "What about him?" Dr. Phill exhaled slowly. "The test results show that Ethan isn't biologically related to you." Gasps filled the studio. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide in disbelief. No, that can't be right." Michael whispered. "Your mother never told me she had another child." Dr. Phil's voice was calm but grave. "It appears this secret runs deeper than anyone imagined. The camera closed in on Sarah's face, torn between heartbreak and shock. Because finding her real father wasn't the final twist. It was only the next betrayal waiting to surface. And as the studio lights dimmed once more, Dr. Phil's words echoed. Sometimes the lies we tell are meant to protect. But protection built on secrets always collapses. The silence after Dr. Phil's reveal was deafening. Sarah sat frozen, tears pooling in her eyes as she tried to process the impossible. Her brother, the one person she thought she could still trust, might not even share her blood. The audience didn't move. Camera stayed locked on Sarah's trembling hands. You could almost hear her heart breaking through the microphone. Dr. Phill spoke softly. Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, but there's something important to understand here. Biology doesn't define connection. It defines information. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her world had just folded in on itself twice. First her father, now her brother. What foundation was left? After the taping, she went backstage, face pale, voice barely a whisper. Run the test again, she said. Please. I need to know for sure. The producers agreed. A second DNA test was ordered. Both Sarah and Ethan's samples sent to a private lab. Waiting for those results felt like torture. Ethan refused to take her calls for days. When he finally did, his tone was cold. You shouldn't have opened that diary, he said. Mom wanted it buried for a reason. Sarah snapped. She wanted the truth. Don't you want that too? He went quiet. Then, in a low voice, he said, the truth ruins people. She hung up, tears burning her face. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt completely alone. A week later, the results arrived. This time, there was no camera, no audience, just Sarah, Dr. Phil's producer, and a thin envelope that held the final piece of her shattered identity. The report confirmed it. Ethan and Sarah shared no genetic link. She sat back, numb. The man she called her brother wasn't family. Not by blood, anyway. But she couldn't erase 33 years of memories. Scraped knees, secret jokes, late-night talks under Christmas lights. Those weren't lies. They were real. When she finally returned to the studio, Dr. Phill met her with that calm, grounded tone only he can pull off. Sarah, he said, DNA doesn't make a family. Love, experience, and forgiveness do. She smiled faintly. I guess I never lost a brother. I just learned how we're connected differently. For the first time in weeks, there was peace in her voice. Pain, yes, but also clarity. She turned toward the camera, as if speaking to her mother through the lens. You built this family out of secrets, she said softly. But I'm going to rebuild it with truth. Dr. Phill nodded, a rare look of pride in his eyes. Sometimes healing means rewriting the story, not erasing it. But just as the air in the room began to ease, he reached for something beside him, the diary. He flipped to the very last page, one Sarah had somehow missed. There's one final note here, he said quietly. It's written in your mother's handwriting. Sarah's breath caught. What does it say? Dr. Phill looked up, eyes heavy with emotion. It changes everything. The camera zoomed in. The crowd leaned forward. And the story, once again, wasn't finished. Dr. Phill held the diary as if it were something sacred. The room had gone completely still. No rustling, no whispers, just the hum of studio lights. He turned the final page carefully. The handwriting was faint, fragile. Her mother's last message. He read it aloud, his voice steady but filled with weight. If Sarah ever finds this, tell her I was never ashamed of her truth, only afraid she'd stop loving me. Sarah's body went still. Her lip trembled, eyes locked on that single sentence. It wasn't an explanation. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession of fear, the kind every parent carries when they think love might not survive the truth. Tears broke freely now. The audience stood silent, many wiping their own. Dr. Phill closed the diary gently. Your mother didn't lie because she didn't love you, he said softly. She lied because she couldn't bear to lose you. Sarah nodded slowly, her voice breaking. She wasn't hiding a sin, she was hiding a wound. Dr. Phill leaned forward. And sometimes, the deepest love looks like protection, even when it hurts everyone involved. Sarah smiled through tears. I think I finally understand her. There it was, That fragile moment between grief and forgiveness where pain starts to soften into meaning. Dr. Phill continued, "You've been living in the shadow of someone else's choices. But today, you've brought light to it. You've turned silence into strength." The audience applauded quietly, not for drama, but for the courage it took to sit there and face it all. Sarah looked toward the empty chair beside her, the one her mother should have been sitting in. "Mom," she whispered, "I forgive you." That sentence didn't echo like pain. It felt like release. The moment the studio doors opened, you could feel every heartbeat in the room. The crowd leaned forward, afraid to even breathe. A figure appeared, slow, hesitant, trembling. The same woman from the footage, but real now, breathing the same air as the daughter she'd lost. Her hands clutched a small, worn photo, edges frayed, colors fading. It was of a baby in a yellow blanket. Rachel. The lights softened. Cameras zoomed in. Rachel sat frozen, her lips parted, but no sound came out. Dr. Phill broke the silence. "Rachel," he said quietly, "this is Linda, the woman who believes she's your biological mother." Rachel's eyes darted between him and the woman. Her mind screamed that this couldn't be real, that it had to be a mistake. But somewhere deep inside, her heart already knew. Linda took a trembling step forward. "Hi, sweetheart." The audience's collective breath caught. Even the camera operators stopped moving. Rachel blinked hard. Her throat felt dry. "Don't call me that," she whispered. Linda nodded, tears glistening. "I know. You don't remember me. You shouldn't. You were so small when they took you." Rachel's chest heaved, confusion flooding every corner of her body. "You're saying they stole me? From who?" "My mom loved me." Linda's voice cracked. "She did love you, but she wasn't supposed to have you." A murmur rippled through the audience. Emily covered her mouth, trembling. Dr. Phill leaned forward. "Linda, let's slow down. Can you explain what happened? As clearly as you can." Linda took a deep breath. "I was 24. I had a baby, Rachel. Her father left. My parents thought I wasn't fit to raise her. There was a custody fight, lawyers' lies. And one day she was gone. They told me she'd been placed in foster care. A few months later, they told me she'd died." Her voice broke completely. "I buried an empty casket, Dr. Phill. I buried my baby." The room fell silent again. Rachel's eyes filled. Her voice shook. "So, if what you're saying is true, then everything I remember, my whole life, was built on someone else's truth," Dr. Phill said gently. Rachel covered her face with both hands. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be happening." Emily reached across, touching her shoulder. "Ratch, maybe it's time to stop fighting it. Maybe it's time to listen." Rachel looked up, her mascara streaked, her face trembling between denial and recognition. She stared at the woman before her, at the trembling hands holding that yellowed photograph. "I remember that blanket," Rachel whispered. "I had dreams about it. I thought I made that up." Linda stepped closer, tears spilling freely now. "You didn't make it up. That was yours. I still have it." She held out the faded photo. "You loved it so much, you wouldn't sleep without it." Rachel's breath caught. For a moment, the noise, the lights, the cameras, all of it disappeared. It was just two people, one searching for her past, the other trying to give it back. Dr. Phill sat in silence, letting the weight of the moment breathe. Linda whispered, "I never meant for you to grow up confused. I never wanted you to hurt." Rachel's voice trembled. "But I did hurt, and I made others hurt because of it." She turned to Emily, tears streaming. "I didn't lie to hurt you, Em. I just told the only story I thought I had." Emily's lips quivered. "I know. I thought you were making it up. But now I see. Maybe you were just trying to understand the pain that was never explained." Rachel nodded, breaking down completely. "I just wanted someone to believe me." Emily reached for her hand. "Now I do." For a long moment, no one spoke. The camera captured something rare. Not spectacle, not confrontation, but raw, human healing. Dr. Phill leaned in softly. "Sometimes," he said, "the truth doesn't destroy us. It rebuilds us, piece by piece." Rachel turned to Linda, her voice small. Ganiyukio." Linda nodded silently. They met in the center of the stage, not perfectly, not gracefully, but honestly. Rachel trembled as Linda wrapped her arms around her. Two broken timelines finally meeting in the middle. The audience rose to their feet. Some cried. Others just held their breath. When they pulled apart, Rachel wiped her face and laughed weakly through her tears. "I guess I wasn't lying after all," she said. "I just didn't know whose story I was telling." Dr. Phill smiled gently. "And now you do." The camera zoomed out as the music swelled softly. The screen faded to black with Rachel holding the photo. The one of her, as a baby, pressed her heart. For the first time, her story was no longer about pain. It was about truth, found in the most unexpected place, forgiveness. Because sometimes the truth doesn't hurt. It heals. The lights on stage dimmed to a warm amber glow. The crowd was still standing. No applause, no noise, just quiet reverence. Rachel sat with Linda and Emily on either side of her. Three women bound, not by blood alone, but by the weight of truth finally set free. Dr. Phil's voice came in low, steady, almost a whisper, the kind that makes everyone lean closer. "You know," he said, looking directly into the camera, "sometimes we spend our whole lives running from the truth. We build stories to survive. We tell ourselves what we need to just to make sense of the pain." He glanced toward Rachel. "But the truth, it doesn't have to be the enemy. Sometimes it's the very thing that heals us, the thing that lets us start over." The camera cut to Rachel. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was tired but peaceful. You could almost see her exhale the years of confusion she'd been carrying. Dr. Phill continued, voice soft and reflective. "If you're sitting at home and you're hiding something, maybe it's guilt, maybe it's pain, maybe it's a story you've told yourself to feel safe, just remember, healing doesn't start with pretending. It starts when we stop being afraid of what's real." A pause. Then, almost like he's speaking to one specific person watching, "Sometimes we don't need a new truth. We just need the courage to face the old one." The final shot lingered on Rachel, Emily, and Linda sitting together, awkward, quiet, but still together. A single caption faded onto the screen. "Truth isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's the beginning." And then, as the music swelled softly in the background, the narrator's voice closed with calm compassion. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a little reminder that no matter how painful the truth is, it's never too late to start healing. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human and to forgive. Dr. Phill closed the show with the kind of line that only he could deliver, the kind that feels more like truth than advice. "Sometimes," he said, "the truth doesn't destroy a family. It rebuilds it, one honest brick at a time." The credits didn't roll right away. Camera stayed on Sarah as she hugged Michael, then Ethan. Three people once broken by silence, now standing together, not perfect but present, because the truth didn't ruin them. It revealed who they were. And as the lights faded, one line from her mother's diary lingered in the air like a prayer. "Love isn't about blood. It's about choosing each other, even after the truth comes out." Stories like Sarah's remind us that truth isn't always gentle, but it's always freeing. If you've lived through secrets, silence, or the kind of love that hurt before it healed, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below, and remember, sometimes the hardest truth leads to the most honest love.